Emily Carter hadn't planned to spend the week at her childhood home. But life had a way of pushing her where she didn't expect to go. After her recent breakup, her apartment in downtown Portland felt too quiet, too empty, like every room echoed her thoughts back at her. When her mom announced she would be leaving for a week-long work conference in Chicago, she suggested Emily stay at the house for a few days. Emily had smiled and agreed, even though part of her wondered if it would feel strange being alone with her stepdad, Michael. He had married her mom when Emily was in college. And while they were perfectly friendly, they had never built a strong father-daughter bond. They simply lived parallel lives under one roof. But the moment Emily stepped inside the house that first evening, something felt different. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet shift, a subtle warmth. Michael greeted her with a calm nod and a small smile. He didn't ask questions, didn't probe into why she looked tired or why her eyes carried a sadness she couldn't hide. Instead, he returned to the kitchen, where something was sizzling on the stove. Emily followed the smell and found him preparing dinner, the space filled with the comforting aroma of garlic, herbs, and roasted vegetables. "I wasn't sure if you'd eaten," he said without turning, his voice low and steady. "Figured I'd make enough for both of us." Emily blinked, surprised by the simple kindness. It wasn't that Michael was cold. He was just quiet by nature, the kind of person who expressed care through actions rather than words. Still, she hadn't expected him to think about her appetite, especially after a long workday. She took a seat at the counter, watching him work with practiced movements, noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The patience in the way he chopped vegetables, the way he wiped the counter as he cooked, the subtle hum he made under his breath when he concentrated. Dinner was peaceful, almost unusually so. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt gentle, like the house itself was offering Emily space to breathe. For weeks, she had been rushing through emotions, trying to convince herself she was okay when she clearly wasn't. This quiet moment gave her a chance to slow down. When she finished eating, she felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in months, sense of being cared for in a way that wasn't loud or dramatic, but deeply human. Later, she stepped outside onto the porch to get fresh air. The sun had already set, and the sky above the neighborhood glowed faintly orange. A soft breeze brushed against her skin, and for the first time in a while, she felt her mind ease, even if just a little. Inside, she could hear Michael washing dishes. Again. The simple sound comforted her more than she expected. She thought back to how distant she had felt from everyone lately. Her breakup had been quiet but painful. No fights, no yelling, just two people growing apart, leaving her feeling like a piece of her life had dissolved without warning. She had carried that weight alone, not wanting to burden anyone. But now, standing in her childhood home, she realized she didn't have to pretend. Here, she didn't need to be strong. Here, she could simply exist. When she went back inside, Michael had already finished cleaning. He glanced at her with a small nod. "Long day?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered with more honesty than she expected. "Long month." He didn't pry further. He simply nodded again, and something about that small gesture made her eyes sting. It wasn't pity. It wasn't forced comfort. It was understanding, a kind she didn't know she needed until that moment. As the evening went on, Emily wandered through the house, noticing how much had remained the same since she moved out. The framed photos, the soft rugs, the scent of her mom's favorite lavender candles, everything felt familiar, grounding. In her old room, she found her bookshelf still filled with novels she used to love. She brushed her fingers along the spines, remembering her teenage years, remembering a version of herself who believed life would always be simple and full of possibility. She sat on the bed, letting the memories wash over her. Maybe being here wouldn't be strange after all. Maybe it was exactly what she needed. When she went downstairs for a glass of water, she found Michael in the living room reading a book. The soft light from the lamp cast a warm glow across the room. He looked up when she walked in, couldn't sleep?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Not used to quiet." "Quiet can help you reset," he replied. "Sometimes silence gives answers noise can't." Emily didn't know why, but his words struck something deep inside her. She nodded slowly, appreciating the unexpected wisdom in his voice. Before she headed back upstairs, Michael added, "If you need anything, I'm around." It was simple, it was steady. It wasn't dramatic or emotional, but it touched her. Later that night, Emily lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She felt a strange mix of sadness and comfort, as if the house was slowly stitching pieces of her heart back together. She thought about how little she really knew Michael. They had always been polite, but she had never taken the time to see the quiet layers of who he was. Maybe she had been too busy growing up, too focused on her own world. Now, for the first time, she felt like she was seeing him as more than Mom's husband. She was seeing him as a person, calm, thoughtful, grounded. She didn't realize then how much this week would change her understanding of him. She didn't realize how his quiet actions would slowly build a bridge she didn't know she needed, and she definitely didn't realize that the next morning would bring someone into her life who would turn this gentle shift into something bigger. Someone who would spark emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. But for now, she closed her eyes, letting the calm of the house settle around her. For the first time in weeks, she felt she might sleep peacefully. She had no idea what the next day held for her, only that something had begun shifting quietly, like the first warm sunrise after a long storm. Emily woke earlier than usual, unsure if it was the unfamiliar quiet of the house or the lingering thoughts from last night that pulled her from sleep. Morning light filtered through her curtains, soft and warm, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel heavy when she sat up. She stretched, slipped on a sweater, and walked downstairs to the kitchen, expecting silence. Instead, she was greeted by the rich smell of fresh coffee. On the counter sat a travel mug, a clean spoon, and a small sticky note in Michael's neat handwriting. "Coffee's ready. Take the mug if you go out." She stared at the note longer than necessary, surprised again by how thoughtful he could be without making a big deal out of it. She poured herself a cup and stepped outside, letting the morning air clear her mind. The neighborhood was peaceful, with soft sunlight warming the dew-covered grass. She took a deep breath, letting the quiet settle inside her. She wasn't expecting anyone to be standing near the front gate. But as she moved closer, the figure shifted and turned. A tall man with warm brown eyes and a familiar smile stood there, hands in his jacket pockets. It took Emily a second to recognize him. "Daniel?" she said, blinking. His smile widened. "Emily Carter." "Wow, I wasn't sure if you still stayed here sometimes." Daniel Hayes, Michael's nephew. She hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years. The last time had been at Christmas, when the entire extended family gathered for dinner. Back then, he had been quieter, more reserved. But now he seemed different, confident, approachable, and undeniably warm. "I just got into town last night," Daniel explained. "Cole Michael told me your mom's away, so I thought I'd stop by and say hello before heading to a meeting." Today, Emily felt a flutter in her stomach she wasn't prepared for. Not a loud feeling, just a small spark of familiarity wrapped in something new. "Well, hello," she said, smiling lightly. They ended up standing by the gate far longer than planned. What began as simple greetings quickly turned into an easy conversation. Daniel asked about her job, her recent art projects, her plans for the future. He listened closely, nodding with genuine interest. It felt effortless talking to him, something she hadn't experienced since before her breakup. At one point, Kay laughed softly. "You haven't changed much, you know. Still thoughtful. Still a little shy when you're surprised." Emily rolled her eyes, laughing. "I'm not shy," he raised a brow. "You kind of are." She playfully nudged his arm, and he laughed again, quiet but warm. When he finally glanced at his watch, he sighed. "I have to go, but it was really good catching up." "Yeah, it was," Emily agreed, surprised at how sincere her own voice sounded. Before leaving, he added, "Maybe I'll stop by again later if that's okay." She nodded. a faint spark of anticipation warming her chest. Yeah, I'd like that. The rest of the morning moved by quickly. Emily tried reading, then sketching, then cleaning, but her thoughts kept circling back to Daniel. There was something about the ease of their conversations, something refreshing, almost comforting. She tried not to read too much into it. She had just come out of a breakup. Her heart was still fragile. But that didn't stop her from noticing how strange it felt to smile again. When afternoon rolled around, she heard the front door open. Michael stepped inside, still wearing his work jacket, carrying a grocery bag. Kay gave her a small nod. Morning, he said. It's already afternoon. Kay, she replied playfully. Still morning for me, he said with a dry tone that made. Emily laughed. He placed the groceries on the counter. Daniel mentioned he saw you earlier. Emily looked up, surprised. You two talked. He called before his meeting, said he ran into you. Michael glanced at her briefly before putting away a carton of eggs. He seemed happy about it. Emily felt her cheeks warm slightly. She wasn't expecting him to notice that small shift in her expression. But Michael noticed everything, even when he didn't comment on it. Later that evening, Emily sat on the porch, enjoying the soft golden light as the sun began to set. She wrapped a blanket around herself, letting the calmness sink into her bones. She heard footsteps and turned to see Michael walking toward her. With a tray holding 3 glasses of iced tea, thought you and Daniel might want something to drink, he said. Emily blinked. Daniel's coming. Michael nodded, said. He'd stop by after his meeting. Should be here soon. And he was right. Not even 5 minutes later, Daniel's car rolled up the driveway. Emily felt her heart quicken just a bit. He stepped out, looking more relaxed now, dressed in a casual jacket and dark jeans. Hey again, he said, smiling as he approached. Hey, she replied, unable to stop her own smile. Michael didn't stay. He simply set down the tray, nodded politely, and went back inside, giving them space without making it obvious. It was another quiet gesture that Emily appreciated. Daniel took a seat next to her on the porch steps. Your uncle is always so thoughtful, he said. Emily nodded. Yeah, I've been noticing that more lately. They talked for hours about his work in Vancouver, about her art, about childhood memories, about the small things that make life feel meaningful. Daniel was easy to talk to. He didn't force conversation. He didn't rush her. He didn't try to impress her. He just listened and shared. And somehow the connection between them grew naturally. When the sky finally turned dark and the porch lights glowed softly, Daniel looked at her with that same warm sincerity she remembered from years ago. It was good talking today, he said gently. Really good. Emily swallowed, her heart lifting quietly. It was? When he stood to leave, he hesitated before going to his car. Can I text you? He asked. Emily didn't even need to think. Yes. After he drove away, she sat on the steps, hugging her blanket closer as she looked at the dark road where his car disappeared. Felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, not certainty. Not love, not anything dramatic. Just possibility. Something soft and new. Inside, she heard Michael clearing dishes from earlier. His steady presence, Daniel's surprising return. The calm of the house, all of it, made her feel like the week ahead might bring more change than she expected. And as she went inside, her phone buzzed. One new message from Daniel. A simple text. It was really nice seeing you today. Maybe tomorrow too. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. Tomorrow. The words suddenly felt full of promise. The next morning, Emily woke with a sense of anticipation she couldn't explain. The sun streamed gently through her curtains, and the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She poured herself a cup of coffee, thinking about Daniel and the message he had sent last night. Maybe today would be different. Maybe it would feel lighter, like something new was finally starting to settle into her life. She sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. After breakfast, Emily wandered into the living room, lost in thought. She didn't notice Michael at first, sitting quietly in the armchair with a book. When he looked up, his calm eyes met hers. "You're quieter than usual," he said gently. Emily paused, unsure if she wanted to share her thoughts. But something about the way he spoke without judgment, without pressure, made her feel safe. "I guess I'm just thinking," she admitted. "There's a lot on my mind lately." Michael nodded slowly. "Life can be heavy sometimes, even when it seems like everything is fine. We carry weight we don't always show." Emily felt a lump in her throat. No one had acknowledged that weight in months. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to simply see it without trying to fix it, without expecting her to be strong. I didn't know I needed someone to notice," she whispered. Michael's expression softened. "That's what family is for. Even if we're not perfect, we can offer care and support in small ways. You deserve that." Emily nodded, a quiet tear slipping down her cheek. She didn't say anything more, but the conversation left her feeling lighter. She didn't have to explain herself fully. She just had to be seen. Michael didn't need to say much more. His presence, steady and calm, was enough. It reminded her of the quiet strength that had always been there in the house, even when she was too busy to notice it. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived again. Emily opened the door, and the familiar warmth of his smile hit her like sunlight. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she replied. Smiling despite herself, they decided to take a walk along the riverside. A short path behind the house, lined with trees shedding their autumn leaves. The crisp air carried the faint scent of the river, and Emily felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease as she walked beside Daniel. He talked about his work, but also asked questions about her life, her feelings, her thoughts. There was no pressure, no expectations, just genuine interest. "You seem happier today," Daniel said after a while, glancing at her with concern and warmth. "I am," Emily admitted, smiling softly. "It's easier to breathe here, I guess." Daniel nodded, understanding. "I noticed the change yesterday, too. There's something about being in a place where people care about you, even quietly. It shifts things." They walked in silence for a moment, letting the sound of rustling leaves and the flowing river fill the space between them. Emily felt an unusual comfort in the simplicity of the moment. She had been so focused on trying to fix her own life that she had forgotten what it felt like to just be present with someone who didn't demand anything from her. Daniel offered that presence effortlessly. After their walk, they returned home, and Emily noticed Michael sitting on the porch with a cup of tea. He looked at her with a calm, almost knowing expression. "How was the walk?" he asked. Emily hesitated. "It's good, really good." Michael nodded. Sometimes a short walk can clear the mind more than hours spent thinking indoors. She smiled. He didn't need to say more. His quiet understanding had become a gentle anchor in her days, and she realized she was beginning to see Michael differently, not just as her stepdad, but as someone who genuinely cared about her. Later that evening, Emily stayed in the living room, sketching in her notebook. Michael was quietly reading in the corner, and Daniel had gone to his room for a short nap before heading home. The peacefulness of the house felt comforting, almost protective. Emily's mind wandered, and she reflected on how much the past 2 days had changed her perspective. She had arrived at her childhood home feeling broken and unsure. But now she felt a quiet strength she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. Suddenly, a soft knock came from the study door. Emily froze for a moment, unsure what to expect. Then she heard the familiar voices of Michael and Daniel. She had intended to ignore them, but something in the tone of their conversation caught her attention. She moved closer, curious despite herself, and listened carefully. Michael's voice was calm but serious. "I'm worried about her, Daniel. She's been hurting for months. I just want her to feel supported while her mom is away." Daniel responded softly. "You've done more than you realize. She told me she feels safe here. She notices your kindness, even if she doesn't say it. Michael paused. I know I'm not her real father, but I care about her. I want her to have honesty and stability. She deserves someone who respects her, someone who makes her feel secure. Emily's heart caught in her throat. She hadn't expected to hear such honesty, such depth of care from Michael. It wasn't a dramatic confession or an emotional outburst. It was quiet, steady, and sincere. It struck her deeply because it revealed the man behind the calm exterior. The father figure she hadn't known she needed. She stepped back, her mind racing with gratitude and surprise. Michael had been there for her in ways she hadn't recognized, and Daniel's presence had only highlighted it. She realized she was surrounded by people who genuinely cared for her. People who wanted her to feel safe and seen. After a few moments, Emily retreated to her room, letting the words sink in. She sat by the window, staring at the darkening sky, feeling a mixture of relief and emotion. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel entirely alone. She didn't feel the weight of her recent heartbreak pressing down on her chest. Instead, she felt a sense of quiet hope and the understanding that she was supported in ways she had overlooked before. Later, Daniel came to her room, knocking softly before entering. Hey, everything okay? He asked, his voice gentle. Emily nodded, smiling. Better than okay. I didn't realize how much small actions could mean. Daniel sat beside her on the bed, not too close, not too distant, just comfortably present. Sometimes it's the little things that matter most, and sometimes we notice them only when we're ready. Emily laughed softly. Yeah, I guess I'm finally noticing. They talked quietly for hours about dreams, past memories, and small daily moments. Emily realized how much she had been missing, not dramatic romance, not intense emotions, but simply connection. She didn't need to rush or push herself. Being seen and understood was enough. And for the first time, she felt the beginnings of a gentle, real attraction toward Daniel, not overwhelming or forceful, just warm and comforting. It felt natural, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. As the night grew late, Emily looked out the window again, thinking about Michael and Daniel, about the calm strength she had discovered in her home and in her relationships. She felt a sense of emotional clarity she hadn't felt in months. For the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace life again, not recklessly, but with quiet confidence, knowing she had support, care, and even the spark of something new on the horizon. She finally climbed into bed, letting the calmness settle over her. The week that had seemed ordinary had become extraordinary in ways she hadn't anticipated. And deep down, she knew that the days ahead would continue to change her life, bringing honesty, warmth, and the promise of connection she hadn't realized she had been longing for. The night ended with her feeling safe, seen, and quietly excited for what tomorrow might bring. The following morning, Emily woke to the sound of soft sunlight spilling across her room. The quiet of the house felt comforting, yet a small excitement fluttered in her chest. Yesterday had been full of conversations and small moments that left her feeling lighter, more alive, and today promised to carry the same gentle warmth. She got dressed quickly, her mind already replaying the words Michael and Daniel had spoken the night before. His quiet care had left a mark she hadn't expected. And Daniel's presence had opened something in her heart, something soft, tender, and full of possibility. After breakfast, she wandered into the living room, sketchbook in hand, hoping to capture some of the morning's peaceful energy. Michael was already there, reading quietly by the window. His calm presence seemed to fill the space, steady and grounding. "Good morning," he said, not looking up from his book. "Morning," Emily replied. Smiling faintly, Michael set his book aside and studied her for a moment. "You've seemed different these past few days," he said gently. "Happier, I think." Emily hesitated. "I guess I am. It's easier to breathe here, somehow." He nodded knowingly. "Sometimes a change of pace, even a small one, can give us perspective. It helps us see what's important." His words carried more weight than she expected. She realized he wasn't talking about the house or the walks. They were talking about her feelings, and her growth. Michael's calm wisdom reminded her how much she had overlooked the steady people in her life before she could respond. There was a soft knock at the door. Daniel stepped in, carrying a small notebook and wearing that warm, familiar smile. "Morning, Emily," he said softly. "Morning," she replied, her heart skipping a beat. "Didn't expect you so early. I wanted to check on you before." "Heading out," he said casually, though his eyes held sincerity. "Yesterday was nice. Wanted to make sure it didn't end too soon." Emily felt a quiet warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad you came." They decided to sit on the porch where the early sun bathed the steps in gold. Daniel opened his notebook and began sketching small doodles, showing them to Emily with playful pride. She laughed softly at his talent and offered a few of her own sketches. Words weren't always necessary. Sometimes sharing a space, sharing creativity, and simply being together said more than conversation ever could. Later, Michael appeared on the porch briefly, carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. "For you," he said, setting it down. He didn't linger, just a polite nod, and then he returned to the house. Emily noticed how natural it felt for him to give them space while still being attentive, a subtle, steady care that spoke volumes without words. She thought about the conversation she had overheard the night before. How he had shared with Daniel his concern and genuine care for her. Michael's quiet devotion to her well-being had never been more apparent, and it moved her deeply. Daniel sipped his tea, glancing at Emily with that same thoughtful look he always carried. "You seem different," he said gently. "Not just happier, but more grounded. Did something happen yesterday?" Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. "No single thing, just realization, I think. Realizing how much people care around me, even quietly. Realizing I've been too busy worrying to notice." Daniel nodded. "I get that. I think sometimes we forget to see the small, important things because we're focused on fixing the big stuff." They continued talking, the conversation weaving between lighthearted stories and deeper reflections. Emily found herself laughing, more easily than she had in weeks, and Daniel listened with sincere attention, making her feel valued and understood. Every word, every gesture, every shared smile created a sense of connection she had been missing for months. It wasn't overwhelming, it wasn't rushed, just steady, comfortable, and full of promise. As the afternoon light shifted, Emily went inside briefly to grab her sketchbook, and from the corner of the living room, she noticed Michael talking quietly with Daniel again. She hadn't meant to listen, but curiosity pulled her toward the study doorway. The words she overheard made her pause and catch her breath. "I worry about her," Michael said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "She's been through a lot recently, and I want her to feel safe. She deserves stability, honesty, and care." Daniel responded softly. "You've done so much for her already. She notices it, even if she doesn't say it aloud. You've made her feel seen." Michael's voice was steady but deep with emotion. "I may not be her biological father, but I care about her as if she were. I want to protect her, guide her, and support her. She deserves to feel safe, understood, and loved just in the right ways." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't expected such raw honesty and sincerity. It wasn't a dramatic confession, but a calm, genuine expression of care, the kind that went deeper than words ever could. For the first time, she fully understood the depth of Michael's presence in her life. His actions, the coffee left on the counter, the quiet gestures, the way he gave her space while still being there, were all part of a subtle, constant expression of love and support. She felt overwhelmed by gratitude and emotion, her eyes misting as she realized how much she had taken for granted. She stepped back quietly, letting the moment linger in her mind, soaking in the sincerity she had just witnessed. Michael and Daniel's conversation revealed the quiet foundation of care she had been surrounded by all along, even when she hadn't noticed. She felt a surge of respect, admiration, and affection not romantic but deeply human and heartfelt for her stepdad. He had been present in ways she hadn't fully appreciated until now. Later, Daniel came to her room again. "You okay?" he asked, sensing her emotional pause. Emily nodded, smiling through the quiet tears. "I'm more than okay. I didn't realize how much small, steady care could mean. I didn't see it before, but now I do." Daniel sat beside her, not too close, but comfortably near. "Sometimes the quiet moments matter most," he said, "and sometimes we only notice them when we're ready." Emily laughed softly, the tension easing from her shoulders. "I guess I'm finally noticing." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking and sketching, sharing stories and exploring the warmth that had grown between them over the past few days. She realized that life didn't always have to be dramatic or overwhelming to be meaningful. Connection, understanding, and steady care, those were the things that truly mattered. As evening approached, Emily sat on the porch again, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Michael moved quietly inside, giving them space, as he had throughout the week. Daniel leaned back slightly, his arm resting casually, his presence calm and reassuring. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known she could feel after months of emotional turbulence. She felt seen, valued, and cared for in ways that went beyond words. And she realized that the spark she felt with Daniel was gentle, honest, and full of promise. Growing naturally from the connection they had formed without pressure or expectation. When night finally fell, Emily climbed into bed, reflecting on everything that had happened. This week had begun with quiet uncertainty and had unfolded into moments of understanding, care, and gentle awakening. She had discovered Michael's steady, heartfelt presence, Daniel's warmth and attention, and most importantly, a sense of emotional clarity and hope. She realized she didn't need dramatic gestures or overwhelming emotions to feel fulfilled. She just needed honesty, connection, and people who truly cared. As she closed her eyes, Emily felt the quiet strength settle. Inside her, she felt supported, understood, and quietly excited for the future. The week had revealed truths she hadn't expected, deepened relationships, and opened the door to a new, gentle chapter in her life. And in the quiet of her childhood home, surrounded by people who cared in their own steady ways, Emily finally felt ready to embrace life again, peaceful, hopeful, and full of possibility.